Hello everybody, welcome to my tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to draw an amethyst crystal. I'll be using an actual crystal that I have as a reference. You can use a crystal or a picture. Start off making the initial sketch with a pencil and notice the shapes that are within the crystal. Once you've drawn in all those shapy parts, I don't know what they're called, I do apologise. Have a look at the tiny little shapes that are below that, and then underneath that there's kind of like these surface lines which I'm drawing in now. They kind of go all the way along the bottom of the crystal. They're the dark grey area. If you look at the crystal you can see the dark grey area at the bottom. With this section you really want to get the shapes. Try and get those different angles. So now I'm going in with the eraser because I want to just rub out all those strong lines, because the last thing you want is for these pencil marks to show through the watercolour. So I'm using these 4 colours. So there's black, purple, yellow, and I'm actually looking at the crystal itself and noticing what colours are in there. There's also some white. So I'm mixing purple, red, a little bit of white, and I'm trying to make it the colour that is the same, or at least as close as possible to the crystal itself. At this point on, we're just making the colour correct. The intensity of the colour we adjust as we go along with the amount of water that we add. So I'm just going to start with really light. So by that, it's the colour I've just mixed, and it's very watered down. It's very watered down, but I'm also being careful not to put too much on the page because I don't want the page to soak through. So I'm just starting with some really light colour, and I do this all the way around the crystal in the areas where I think they should go. It's quite confusing when you're painting something like this because there are so many different angles and different shapes. It can take an awful lot of concentration, so it is okay to improvise sometimes if you get lost at what you're looking at, which is very easy to do. Improvise and imagine where the shapes might be. So as I'm going along, I'm kind of just I'm sticking with the light colours, but I am sort of adjusting the tones very slightly just to give it some more depth. As it goes on, I just keep adding darker shades. So by that, again, I'm basically using the same colour that I mixed, but I'm just using less water. As you're adding it in the purple, do try and keep some little white areas as reflection marks. They're really important, so make sure you keep some areas completely white and free from paint. At this point I've noticed that I'm starting to lose the shape, the drawing of the crystal, which is making it a little bit confusing, but I'm just trying to concentrate and I'm trying to keep the shapes as much as I can see. Again, I'm just going in with some slightly darker shade now this time, and I'm really trying to accentuate those shadows and darker areas. Crystals are one of those things which are really challenging sometimes because it's not like a solid object where if a light was shining on an object, it would be light on one side and there would be a shadow on the other. With crystals, it's different. There are so many different angles, and also the nature of the translucency of the crystal means that the light is actually going through the crystal itself. So the typical looking at light and shadow is a little bit distorted, if you like. I think for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to call this colour that I've mixed purple, because if I start calling it amethyst, it's just going to get really confusing. So I'm going in with a darker shade of purple on some of the surfaces of each of those tiny little crystals within this drawing. Often I just feel, and by looking at the crystal you can see that the darker areas are actually more in the depths, so they're in between all the little crevices, but they are also on some edges and they are also on some corners. So this is what I mean, it can be quite a confusing painting to do, but if you just concentrate on it you should be able to get somewhere. And just the nice thing about watercolour as well is that it actually has that watery translucency sort of tone about it, so naturally it's got that sheen. So here I'm adding some of that yellowish colour, I think it was yellow ochre, and if you look at the amethyst you can see the yellows that are in there, and I don't think this is a bad match actually, it's quite a close colour, so that's nice. As I've started to lose sight of each of the individual little crystals within the crystal, within the geode, I thought it would be a good idea at this point to go in there with my Fineliner and do some outlining. It's trying to be as neat as I can, and because this is final now, these outlines are here to stay. So what I do now with these outlines is really important. So this bit will involve more concentration again. It's almost like drawing the picture again, like the initial sketch, but except this time you don't really want to make mistakes. At least with the pencil you can rub it out, the pen you can't. So do concentrate on this part and try and get each line really neat, really straight. Really try and show those corners, those shapes. The shapes are really important here. For the purpose of this tutorial, I have actually taped my piece of paper to my desk, but you might find that actually it's really helpful to not do that, which is what I normally do when I'm drawing without doing a tutorial. I won't have it attached to my desk. You might find it helpful to just move the paper around so that it's at a better angle for you to get a straighter line. That can be really helpful. Sometimes it's almost like your body is in the way of your arm and you can't quite get the angle that you want, as if you could if you were moving the paper around. So now that the outlining's done, it's time to go in with the darkest shade of purple that we've used yet. And this bit you need to start being careful, because sometimes if you add too much dark it can be very overpowering. And you really need to be mindful of those white areas, because those white bits, you want most of those to stay. Those bits are your reflections. Those bits are what makes the crystal a crystal. That's what brings this picture to life, are those reflections and these dark areas. So try and keep those white areas there. Try not to go over them. A safe way to do this is to take the darker areas and put it over the bits that you've already painted. But if you do feel there's a bit that's white on your page, on your crystal drawing, and you do want it to be dark, then go ahead and colour it in dark. So I just keep going around the whole crystal until I'm happy with it, but I'm not, like I say, I'm just being really careful with this bit, because this is, there's a lot of potential to ruin the picture when you're at this stage, so you've just got to be very mindful of that. Also, as you're painting, being mindful the whole way along that you've still got room to go darker, because here with the shade that I'm using, I've still got quite a lot of water in there, so actually it can go slightly darker to what it is now. So now I've done all that, it's time to do the base. Now if you look at the crystal in the top left hand corner of the page, you can see there's like tiny little, there's grey areas. It's grey and it's transparent, and there's yellows. So to simplify this whole process, I'm going straight in with the grey sort of colour, and naturally it's mixing in with some amethyst purple, which is fine. And I'm kind of just basically painting in those tiny little shapes, and then I'm going back down all the way along, sort of horizontally, painting in the base line. I don't know what that part of the crystal is called. I can't say. I'm very sorry. So I'll just call it the baseline. It's that squiggly bit at the bottom. Now, you don't have to do this, but you can if you want to. You can add some extra definition or some shading using the pen. I actually like it both ways. You don't have to do this bit. I think this bit makes it just gives it a bit of quirkiness to it. It gives it a little bit more character. Right, going back to the base again. Now, if you just look right now at these little shapes that I'm drawing, they're like, I'm just going to do this all the way along because they are naturally like this. And then I'm just going to go in between the little crevices and in between all the little gaps and fill them in with black, because they're quite dark in between those gaps, and I just want to accentuate them. By doing this, they almost look like they are sticking out a bit more, like it gives it a bit more of a 3D sort of effect. It kind of, again, brings it to life. And then again, I'm going back to the baseline, just going all the way along horizontally, wibbly wobbly line that it naturally is. Nature is full of wibbly wobbly lines. So underneath those little triangular bits, I'm just filling in those little funny little shapes. And then the picture is nearly done, so I basically just want to make some neatening adjustments. By that I mean I'm just going around the crystal and just neatening up any edges where there might be a bit of paint run over or a wonky line that I'm not happy with. Some of them are wonky naturally, but some of them they're not supposed to be. So I just go around and neaten up anything I'm not really sure about. But again, just be mindful that the thickness of the line can change the dimensions of the crystals themselves. And the other thing I noticed was actually some of my paint wasn't blended in. So I've just gone back in with a clean brush with clean water. It's very important, it's got to be clean water, otherwise you could end up colouring in all these little white bits. And I'm just going in and blending in those bits that aren't blended. Now, just be mindful that if you move the brush from paint, so from the purple to the white, you will end up painting the white bit purple. So if you want to keep those white bits in there, but you kind of want to blend it, move the brush from the white bit towards the dark. So move the brush in that direction. So thank you for watching my tutorial, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it could help you in some way. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I aim to post a tutorial, art tutorial once a month. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye!